everyone, how are we all doing? My name is Kay and I'm Crafter with Kay, and welcome to my reading nook. We are doing really well with the Hellcat series so far. Big shout out and thank you to Sharon Hannaford again for allowing me this opportunity. It's a lot harder than it looks, but I am thoroughly enjoying it. We do have a finish. I'll put what I was working on over here somewhere. Curl Up with a Good Book. It is now up on my wall. So that means we need another canvas to work on. So before I show you that, I just want to say a word of warning. I've been putting the warnings at the start of my videos and I hope to continue to do so. These books are for, I'd say, young adults onwards. So there is violent scenes, sexual natures, nothing too explicit, but there is still undertones and language, and yeah. So you are warned, it's not for under 18s, under 15s, 18s. Use your discretion. Viewer discretion is advised. So the next kit we are going to work on is from Diamond Art Studio by Eszter Anna, and it's Tame Your Fears, because this is just awesome. So I have unboxed this recently on my channel, but as you can see there is a woman grabbing the dragon, taming her fears. Nothing is impossible, as Cindy would say. But it's true, I just love all the colours, so you will be seeing this on a time-lapse very soon. But I hope you all enjoy and continue to enjoy this series. And thank you for following me on this journey. So see you soon, enjoy! Chapter 9. Ian concurred with Julius's doctor and sent Gabby straight to radiology for x-rays. Gabby had tried to shoo Carl from the room before Ian examined her, but he'd stubbornly sat in the chair and refused to budge. Gabby knew he was glaring holes in her when he saw the size of the dark purple and black marks on her ribs and the stitched bite wound, but she pointedly ignored him. Ian double-checked Gabby's shoulder joint and the stitches and did a full examination of her eyes while they waited for the results of the x-rays. Her eyesight seemed perfectly normal, and the x-ray results confirmed that she had a fractured collarbone and 3 fractured ribs. But nothing needed resetting, so Ian prescribed strapping and rest. Ian declared her officially off duty for 2 weeks, and when she grumbled loudly over that, he simply raised an eyebrow and reached for the phone. Gabby knew he would call Byron and tell him to take her off the roster for 4 weeks, so she snatched the phone away quicker than Ian's human eye could track. "All right, 2 weeks," she capitulated grumpily. "But don't expect me to like it." She plunked the phone back in its cradle a little harder than was strictly necessary. Ian bit back a smile and wrote out a prescription for more pain meds. "Carl, Rose and Byron will be keeping an eye on you, so don't make me book you off longer," he warned. "Keep your arm in that sling and get Rose to help with that strapping on your ribs. She's done it before." "Can you do some normal work at least?" she demanded. "I do need to make a living somehow." Ian and Carl both snorted at her last comment. They both knew it was more her inability to sit still than the need to earn money. "Yes, you can do some normal work, but nothing handling large animals. Consulting only. Nothing hands-on, and someone else will have to drive you to appointments," Ian said, closing the loopholes quickly. He was beginning to know her too well, she thought, resisting the urge to stick out her tongue at him, and instead fished a lollipop out of the jar on his desk and went and snatched up the prescription. She went around to the other side of Ian's desk and gave him a kiss on his cheek, making sure to leave some sticky lollipop residue behind. "Thanks, brother Firstpants," she teased him impishly before stalking out of the door. Carl gave him a sympathetic grin and raised him a quick mock salute before following after her. Ian's worried "good luck" drifted after him. Gabby was alone in the house catching up on emails when Byron called later that afternoon. He reported that the council had decided to do further investigation before making a decision. They specifically wanted to substantiate Julius's claims regarding the dark mage, Mariska. If they could find information that Mariska was indeed a dark mage and had gone renegade, they would agree to a meeting with Julius. Meanwhile, Byron had a few ideas of where and how the meeting could be set up. He couldn't tell Gabby how long it would be before they heard back from the record keeper of the Magi High Council, but thought it might take a few days. Gabby chafed at the delay, instinctively knowing that Julius was not going to be pleased, but she also knew that the council was right to be cautious. At least they hadn't flat out refused the meeting. She was also pretty sure that Julius wasn't going to talk to her over the phone about the matter and would insist on their planned meeting. But Byron didn't need to know that. The less he had to worry about, the better. Gabby worked on the principle of it was easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Not that she made a habit of asking for either, but the basic principle was there. She rang off from Byron after he assured her he would keep her updated on any developments. Then she pulled out the small white card Julius had tucked in with her swords and called the number handwritten on it. There was no answer and no message. The call simply went straight to a beep prompt. This threw Gabby for a moment, but she recovered quickly enough. What else would you expect when calling a vampire? "This is Gabrielle Bradford," she said in her most professional voice. "I have some news from the council. Call me." She added her mobile number, though she figured he probably already had it, and hung up. She rubbed her eyes wearily and wondered if she had enough time for a cat nap before she heard back from Julius. There were still a couple of hours until full dark, so she decided to take the chance. She tucked her mobile into her sling, snagged Razor off the sleeper couch in the corner of the office, and went to catch up on some sleep. An annoying buzz woke her. Her phone was vibrating on the table next to her bed. She glanced at the clock. It was a little after 6 p.m. Probably Carl checking up on her, she thought testily. She picked up the mobile, the message icon flashing merrily on the screen, an exact counterpoint to her cranky mood. She touched the icon and was surprised to find the message was from an unknown number. It read, "Gabrielle, thank you for your quick response. I would like to discuss in person. Name your favourite restaurant. I will book for 9 p.m, one person each as discussed. Julius." She sighed. She'd known he would find a way to force a meeting. She should have waited until tomorrow to call him. At least she would have been able to have an early night tonight. She knew the perfect restaurant, though, so she immediately sent a message back saying, "Olivia, Old Mill Road, make it 8:30. Her mood immediately lightened as she pictured a huge rare rump steak with a mountain of chips and a bottle of good Italian red. Olivia belonged to a shifter who was a friend of hers. They made the best steaks in the city, had an eminently noteworthy wine list, and their chocolate mousse was positively ambrosial. It had the added bonus of being in a largely residential area, so Gabby could easily be able to monitor any extra vamp presence, and if push came to shove, Sean would be in his office and back, so she had extra backup without Julius knowing it. Her mobile chimed again. "Agreed," was the short reply. She made a call to Kyle and was pleasantly surprised when he didn't even bother trying to talk her out of it. He just asked what time he needed to pick her up and hung up. It was 8:30 on the dot when Kyle stopped her car a few blocks from the restaurant. Gabby had refused to drive in the van this time, and had once again tossed him the keys to her car. He waited quietly while she scanned the area, casting her senses out to feel for the ominous vibration spots that indicated vampire presence. There were just two, Julius radiating like a miniature supernova, and another fairly strong present quite close to him. When she was sure it's just the two of them, she nodded to Carl to drive on to the restaurant. They parked the car and Gabby quickly checked the area. The vampires were already in the restaurant and there was no signs of any others nearby. As she stepped out into the slight drizzle and grimaced at the starless sky, she wondered if the vampires would be eating or drinking tonight. Human food, that was. She only knew the common folklore that stated they survived purely on human blood. She was intensely curious to find out the truth. She and Carl made a quick dash for the welcome shelter of the doorway, being careful to keep to human speed. The maitre d' quickly came to open the door and welcome them into the fragrant warmth of the cosy but chic little restaurant. "Ah, Miss Bradford," the maitre d' greeted her enthusiastically. "It's wonderful to see you this evening. And Mr. Robson, it's been too long since we last saw you." The short, swarthy man helped Gabby out of her leather jacket, clucking when he saw her arm in a sling. What this time, Miss Bradford?" he asked with a slight exacerbated tone. "Not an out-of-control lion again, I hope?" Gabby grinned, remembering the last time she came in bashed up and blamed it on a rogue lion. It hadn't been a huge lion. There wasn't that much difference between a rogue werewolf and a rogue lion. At least her job as an animal trainer made it easy to come up with excuses for injuries. "No, George, not a lion this time," she said quickly, racking her brain for a new excuse. "Just a frisky thoroughbred stallion. Managed to put my shoulder out of the joint. Nothing too serious," she explained, trying to keep her thoughts about Julius in the proper compartment in her mind as an image of him prowling in his office popped into her head. George tusked as he hung up their jackets in the coat room. "You really must be more careful, Miss Bradford. Perhaps you need to stick to little kitties and puppies. They're much safer to deal with," he fussed. Carl barked out a laugh. "You've obviously never met Gabby's cat if you really think they're safer," he muttered darkly. George shook his head, as though knowing his concerns wouldn't change this young lady's mind. "Your friends are here already. Let me take you to the table. Shall I let Sean know you're here? I'm sure he would love to see you," George babbled merrily as he led them through the candled tables to a private alcove in the far side of the restaurant. "No, it's all right, George. I'll pop in and see him in his office once I've greeted my guests." She didn't want to expose her little advantage too early. Julius rose leafily as she came around the edge of the partition which had been used to create a small private alcove. She watched his eyes skim over her body, taking in her black hipster dress pants and deep maroon blouse, as well as the black silk scarf she'd converted into a sling. He seemed to study her unbound hair a little longer than strictly necessary, and she wondered if he could make out the hilt of her sword, nestled into the nape of her neck. She pasted a cool, businesslike expression on her face as she acknowledged him. "Gabrielle," he greeted in a low, smooth purr. "Thank you for meeting with us this evening." He turned slightly to indicate his companion sitting on the table. "This is Alexander, one of my most trusted friends." The other vampire had a barely concealed skull on his face. He had a much slighter build than Julius and Carl, with a musy, pale blonde hair and face straight off the cover of a Mills and Boon romance. The image was so strong, Gabby had to gulp back a disbelieving giggle, covering it with a discreet throat clearing and moving aside to introduce Carl. She nodded a greeting to the disgruntled-looking Alexander. "Hey, Jules," she said cheerily. "This is Carl. As I'm sure you're already aware, Carl, this is Julius." They nodded warily at each other, no one reaching to shake hands, and Alexander's face grew more surly by the second. Gabby sighed, lamenting the fact that males of all species felt the need to size each other up. She took the lead and sat down in the seat opposite Julius, leaving Carl to take the one across Alexander. There was an open bottle of Chianti standing on the table. Before she could reach for it, Julius was holding it above her glass, questioning tilt to his eyebrows. "Can I pour you a glass?" he asked politely. She glanced around the table. There was a half-full glass of red in front of Julius's seat, and Alexander had his hand around a short glass that smelled like it held bourbon. "I trust it's a decent bottle," she challenged. "One of the best, according to the maitre d'," he answered smoothly, pouring before she could even think of another smart-ass comment. He offered Carl, who declined in favour of waiting for a beer. Julius settled into his seat just as a young female waiter appeared to take orders. She seemed flustered. As Gabby looked around the table, she realised why. Carl had the kind of face and physique that drew attention from women and men wherever he went, and tonight he was possibly the least attractive man at the table. With Alexander doing his best James Dean bad boy impression, and Julius exuding dark brooding predator, Gabby could almost pity the girl, but she was having her own problems trying to keep her treacherous mind on the business at hand. Alexander briskly ordered a refill of bourbon, and Carl ordered a beer and 2 platters of antipasto for himself and Gabby. Julius asked for another bottle of wine. Neither of the vampires ordered any food, Gabby noted with interest. The flushed girl left to collect the drinks, and Gabby reached for a wine glass, savouring the first sip slowly. Julius's eyes tracked her every movement. "How are your injuries?" he asked Gabby. "Fine," she answered flatly, ignoring Carl's annoyed frown. At least he was holding his tongue. She'd warned him if he couldn't be polite to keep quiet. Obviously he was finding it difficult to be polite. Perhaps that was Alexander's problem too. The hunky blonde vampire had yet to say a word to anyone at the table. "I would like you to forward any medical bills to my office," Julius continued, "and let me pay for a driver until you're healed. It's the least I can do." Gabby was thrown for a second, and somewhat amused. Not often you got beaten up by a bunch of vampires who then offered to pay your doctor's bills. She allowed a small amused grin to appear as she dropped her gaze from his. "No, that's not necessary. My bills are covered already," she drawled, tipping the wine glass and inhaling the pungent bouquet. "But if it makes you feel any better, you can owe me a favour." She took a mouthful of wine and looked him straight in the eyes to gauge his reaction. His mouth tightened, but she thought it was an amusement rather than annoyance, when she noticed the cocky glint in his eye. "All right," he agreed smoothly. "I owe you a favour." "Do you have a specific favour in mind, or is it to be an open-ended one?" He leant back in his seat, bringing his own wine glass to his lips, appearing to savour the taste as he swallowed. "Oh, let's go with open-ended." She was enjoying the repartee. "So we are agreed," Julius affirmed. "I owe you a yet-to-be-determined favour at a yet-to-be-determined time, and you will forgive me for indirectly causing you harm." Gabby's eyebrows quirked as he added the last part, but she decided to continue the charade. "I can live with that," she declared. A low growl issued from the right of her. Alexander apparently wasn't happy with the arrangement. Gabby had had about enough with his Neanderthal-like attitude. She leaned back in her seat and dropped her left hand down beside the chair, her fingers now millimetres from the knife strapped to her left calf. She turned her attention to the vampire. "Legs boy, are you always this cranky, or is it just a show you put on for pretty girls?" she asked him. Sticks and dragons, one day she was seriously going to regret poking a dragon. She felt Julius and Carl both tense, waiting for Alexander's reaction. He leaned forward in his seat, giving Gabby a venomous glare. "My name is Alexander," he ground out in a clipped, aristocratic British accent. "And I'm cranky because I'm hungry and Julius won't let me snack on you." He finished in a hard, sharp hiss, snapping his fully extended fangs at her aggressively. Fortunately, their little alcove was completely private, and the hum of the other diners drowned out anything they said to each other. "Alexander," Julius snapped warningly, but Gabby wasn't about to be cowed by an angel-faced bully, no matter how close he was to Julius. She leaned slowly forwards to the angry vampire, no hint of fear in her, keeping her eyes locked onto his. "I wish Julius would allow you to try," she said in a deceptively calm, quiet voice. "That set of fangs would make a really nice necklace." She enunciated the last 3 words carefully, drawing them out. If a vampire could spontaneously combust, then Alexander would probably have burst into flames on the spot. His expression threatened death by small increments. Gabby felt the swell of Julius's power. He was obviously worried that this was about to get out of control. "Gabby," Carl growled warningly just as the waitress appeared with their drinks and starters. Gabby relaxed her stance and went back to innocently sipping her wine, as the waitress placed the platters of meat and cheese in front of her and Carl. The freshly made up and newly perfumed waitress breathlessly asked for their main orders. Her disappointment obvious when Julius and Alexander declined, saying they'd already eaten. Gabby and Carl made up for it by ordering huge rare steaks with all the trimmings. The interlude seemed to calm Alexander, or perhaps that was Julius's influence. Either way, the obnoxious vampire had lapsed back into sullen silence. Gabby regretfully decided to leave the dragon alone for now. "I apologize for Alexander's behaviour," Julius addressed Gabby, as though none of it was her fault by stirring up the angry vampire. "He's somewhat annoyed with me for seeking out assistance with your organisation. He feels it undermines my authority in the clan. Makes me look weak," he explained. He pursed his lips and shot a sidelong glance at Alexander. He has yet to understand the severity of what we're about to come against. Alexander hasn't had much experience with demons, so he's convinced we could deal with them on our own. He's forgotten that wild demons can only cross the void at night. They are quite capable of moving around in sunlight, if they escape detection for that long. He sounded like he was trying to drum the lecture into Alexander's head for the 100th time. As he said the last sentence, a few more pieces of the puzzle clicked together in Gabby's head. She glanced surreptitiously at Carl, wondering if he'd made the same connection. The vampires needed the SMV's help because Dante had minions who were able to attack during daylight. This exposed Julius's clan in the most dangerous ways. They could be slaughtered without even being able to defend themselves. Carl nodded minutely, acknowledging the connection. The quest for an alliance was beginning to finally make sense. Julius leaned over to refill Gabby's glass before filling his own. "You said in your message you had some news for us from the council? I trust that means you presented my case to them," he asked Gabby, watching as she shoveled the thinly sliced meat and cheese wedges into her mouth. "Yep," Gabby answered between mouthfuls. "I met with the council this morning. They've agreed to consider your request for a meeting." She winced and shook her head slightly. "I know that sounds extremely bureaucratic, but at least they didn't dismiss the idea outright." If Julius was disappointed, he hid it well. His expression remained bland, even though Alexander snorted derisively. "Alexander, perhaps it would be better if you just waited for me in the car," Julius said in a deceptively mild voice, a muscle tightening in his jaw. Alexander finally seemed to realize he was pushing Julius a step too far. "No, I'll restrain myself," he conceded, dropping his gaze from Julius and burying his nose in his drink. Julius took a deep breath, watching Alexander for a long moment before addressing Gabby again. "Did the council give you any time frame of any kind? I understand the bureaucracy involved in any kind of council, but we're running out of time. I think Dante is preparing some kind of assault as we speak. They want to try and verify some of the details you've given us, mostly about the Dark Mage. They've sent an inquiry to the Magi High Council for any information they have on her. If they can establish that she's the Dark Mage, that she's working with Dante, they'll meet with you. Further conversation was stalled by the arrival of Kyle and Gabby's main course. The waitress fussed at the table for a while, hovering until Gabby felt a slight brush of Julius's power, and abruptly the girl seemed to realise she had something else to do and scuttled off. Gabby raised a questioning eyebrow in Julius's direction. He smirked back at her, unrepentant, like a schoolboy caught cribbing on a minor test. She won't be back to bother us for a while, he said as though that excused him. Useful talent, Gabby remarked blandly. What other tricks do you have up your sleeve? She pretended she wasn't particularly interested in his reply, as she gingerly slipped her right arm out of its sling to cut into her juicy chunks of red meat. Carl and Julius simultaneously leant forward to offer assistance. She glared them both back into their seats, but ground her teeth as she used her injured arm to hold the meat in place with a fork and sliced off bite-sized chunks with her left hand. She caught Julius and Alexander both watching her with an odd intenseness as she devoured the succulent meat. What? She demanded. Girl's gotta eat. She was a tad sensitive about her enormous appetite. She knew it wasn't considered appropriate for a woman to eat like she did. She often got incredulous stares when she ate in a restaurant. Julius shook his head, and Alexander actually cracked a hint of a smile. Sorry, Julius apologized quickly. We're not passing judgment. It's just been a long time since we've actually watched a human eat. It brings back memories, makes us yearn for a variety of taste. He got a distant look in his eyes. So the legend's got that bit right then, she nudged. You can't eat any human food? Yes, Julius confirmed. We can't digest solid foods. We could eat if we had to, but then we'd have to purge ourselves soon afterwards. It also doesn't taste very palatable to us. So to appreciate the taste of a good rare steak, we have to taste it vicariously through your reactions. We can, obviously, he indicated their glasses, drink liquids, and as some of us get older, we develop the ability to taste some of them like we did as humans. Hence my appreciation of red wine and Alexander's inclination towards bourbon. Gabby found herself enthralled, and even Carl was paying close attention to Julius's discourse about abilities and disabilities of being a vampire. The tension around the table gradually started to ease, and Alexander even added the odd snippet of information. Julius confirmed that while breathing was not necessary, they still did it both to appear normal in human company, as well as to smell their environment, a sense essential to a vampire. Julius sent out a thread of power to summon the waitress back to clear the table and take dessert orders from Carl and Gabby. Julius then turned the tables on her. Would you tell us something, now that we've been open with you? He suddenly asked. I guess that depends on what you want to know, she said, suddenly wary. Your exceptional... He paused, searching for the right word. Abilities. Are they vampire in nature? Why would you say vampire? She hedged. He smiled but answered for her. Well, firstly, the word on the street is you are half vampire. And secondly, you have a very subtle but definite vampire scent. Gabby concentrated on taking a large sip of her Irish coffee, contemplating her answer. He waited her out patiently. Finally, she made up her mind. Yes, they are a vampire in nature, she said, only answering his direct question. She was going to make him work for his answers. His eyes narrowed, and she thought he looked a trifle disturbed. But that's impossible, unless you're ingesting vampire blood on a regular basis, he said slowly. Gabby kept her calm face and looked directly into his eyes. No, it's not impossible, and no, I'm not drinking vampire blood, she said, holding his gaze. He'd gone dead still, and he didn't appear to be breathing. Gabby flinched when Carl's mobile suddenly vibrated. He glanced at the incoming number and immediately pushed away from the table to take the call. The others turned their attention to him as he listened to the voice on the other end of the call. His expression turned serious. Shit, he swore roundly. When, where, and how many? As he listened again, Gabby knew instantly what was happening. She glanced at Julius. Call the waitress, we need the check, she said tersely, looking regretfully at her bowl of chocolate mousse, knowing it was heading back to the kitchen. What's wrong? Julius asked instantly, on full alert. The air was saturated with the scent of adrenaline by the time Kyle disconnected the call. I gotta go, he stated simply. Gabby grabbed his arm as he went to stand. How many? She demanded. Too many, came his brisk reply. Can you catch a cab home? No chance, I'm coming with you, she declared. Don't be stupid, he responded curtly. You're already injured and you're only making it worse. I can see it on your face. They are going to need every sword we got. My perfect good health is not worth the life of innocence. Carl shook his head, realizing he didn't have time to get through to her. Okay, fine, whatever. Julius spoke then. You're talking about a demon attack, aren't you? Demon attacks, Carl asserted, emphasizing the plural. At least 3 different locations, multiple demons. It's not going to be pretty. We have to go. Now. He stood up, drawing Gabby with him. We're coming with me. Give me coordinates and I'll call for reinforcements, Julius announced. Alexander, call Nathan, tell him to get a team together. We'll call him with the details soon. Carl started to protest, but Gabby quickly stopped him. It makes sense. Why not let them help if they're willing? She looked at him challengingly. When he didn't argue further, she turned to Julius. You'll have to stick with us tonight, though. I can't guarantee the other teams will see you as allies instead of enemies. He nodded, standing as Alexander pulled a phone from a pocket and began dialing. He threw a wad of notes from his pocket and slid them underneath the empty wine bowl. Let's go. We'll follow you. See you next time.